Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast, a podcast about how to grow your business from $100,000 and beyond in the land of the rising sun.
Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Batino, and on today's episode, we have Robert Purse for the second time. He is the founder and managing director at McLaren Group, a bilingual end-to-end marketing consultancy based in Tokyo. And their services include marketing strategy, consumer research, marketing plan execution, and business development. And Robert is a marketing expert and has worked with major brands during his over 15-year career. In our first episode, we discussed about understanding what a marketing agency does and the various types of marketing agencies and what type of services they provide. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how to choose the right marketing agency in Japan. So, Robert, thank you for agreeing to come back on again. And could you please give a self-introduction?
Great. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Tyson. It's great to be back. Great introduction. Maybe just to add on to that, bit of a personal note, but Japanese wife here, two kids, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. So yeah, pretty busy on all fronts there.
Teenagers. It's like
yes. It's different things to enjoy and different problems to work through.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have you on again. And it's I think you have a wide breadth of knowledge about marketing agency and marketing in Japan through personal experience. And I think just you helping decode and really understanding the differences is going to help the listeners choose an agency that fits their needs much better. So I'm looking forward to diving into this. But could you give kind of a quick summary of what we talked about last time? So for those who might be listening for the first time, or for those who have listened but maybe need a refresher.
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah, it was a great conversation last time, and I can just maybe pick up a few of the key points and give a 10-minute, let's say, or 5. Let's see how quick we go. We started pretty broad. What is marketing? So a few of my personal favorite definitions are, the first one is places the consumer at the heart of the business. It's the guy in the organization who does that, and he's always thinking about the consumer. Because a lot of times I see companies, they're really focused on the sell in rather than the sell out. So what I mean by that is the sell in is in terms of, selling it into your distributor or your partner to get it in the stores, which is obviously clearly important because someone can't buy something if it's not in the store. But then you also you still need to get the sell out, right? Because at the end of the day, that's if you get sell out, then everyone's winning, right? So I think that the marketing guy is the guy in the team or in the company who's kind of obsessing about that. And the saying I like is the consumer is your lover. So that's kind of how the marketing guy or girl, let's say. So we talked about that. Then we talk about what agencies do or what can they do. And the two big areas are strategy and execution. Obviously, depending on the different kind of agencies, they can offer either both or one of those services. So strategy, we talked about, again, my favorite definition of strategy, but it's strategy is what you're not going to do. So basically, if you can answer that question, it means, okay, you've probably got a strategy because you've had to think about all the potential things that you could do. And you're like, okay, we're actually going to just focus on these ones, or you've ranked them at least. And you're like, this is our first priority. This is our second priority. Let's try that out for however it may be, a few months, half a year, and then let's reflect on it. Let's see if that's working, and then learn and reiterate as needed. We shortly touched on a few different frameworks to get to that strategy. And one of my personal favorites and seems to be working for our clients is who, what, where, and how. Who are you targeting? What are you going to tell them to influence their purchase decision-making? And where and how are you going to do that? And that's more like channels. Through which channels are you going to communicate that message? We then talked about the different types of agencies. So we talked about freelancers, production companies, small size marketing agencies, medium creative and media agencies, and large creative and media agencies. We did go into quite a bit of detail, pros and cons and all this sort of stuff, but I guess just to give a really super quick summary of the conversation, freelancers, they're great executors. They can be very cost effective, but the thing is, you need to know what you're doing. You need to be able to brief them. You need to be able to kind of hold their hand throughout that process, and also be able to evaluate what they're doing. So you need to have some knowledge of what you're actually asking them to do. They're not going to give you that strategic part. They're just going to execute what you say, basically. Production companies, in my personal experience, have been very creative, but again, they're like executors. They're probably not really jumping into that strategic space and going to challenge you on a brief or give you a bit broader, a bit of a more broad viewpoint on your strategy or something like that. They're probably not the best from a management point of view. And if there's a few reasons for that, but one is a lot of times they're working directly with a bigger agency, so a bigger creative agency. So there's a little bit of a different dynamic with when they're working directly with a client, let's say. And again, you do need to basically know what you're doing to be able to direct them and fill that management gap. Third one there is the small size marketing agencies. In my personal experience, these are great value for money, even if the client has a smaller budget. And they're going to give that holistic service. So they're going to give you the strategy, or they're going to support you with that strategic element. And then they're going to walk you through the execution and manage that side of the whole plan as well. So then you move into these medium-sized creative and media agencies. And in my personal experience, I've had great experiences with these kind of companies. And again, they offer a holistic service. But the caveat there is you basically need to have a decent budget to be able to work with these people and to get the good people within the companies. When I'm saying budget, I'm talking like, sizable budget. So more than 50 million Japanese yen or 500K USD. And then the final one there is those large media and creative agencies. And again, this does sort of tie back to your budget. And I'd say it's probably only worthwhile if you have a really big budget and or you need that brand name for whatever reason. But the interesting thing with these large size companies is a lot of times they're actually outsourcing to these smaller agencies and freelancers and whatnot. In any case. So if you're working with a small size agency, for example, they actually have access to the same resources. If you're working with people or companies that have a solid network, like us, for example, who've been here for quite a while, then you can, at the end of the day, you're actually getting the same people to work on the projects as opposed to having to go through a bigger agency, if that makes sense.
I did want to ask one question. So I know a lot of really, really good small agencies, and they're usually booked for like a couple months on end. But if you deal with like the medium and large size companies, because they're outsourcing to other freelance small agencies, can they pretty much take on your projects immediately, or do you have to sometimes wait?
Yeah, that's a good point, Tyson. In my experience, I haven't had to wait in that sense, but I think I've basically been lucky because, I've always been tied with a relatively big company from the get-go, and I've had a relatively good budget. So I think they would have prioritized my brand in that sense. But I think too, back to your point, because they do have a strong network of these agencies that they are working with, then, that they, if one of the agencies is booked out, then they kind of just go to the next one and whatnot. But no, I sort of haven't had that issue myself.
Yeah, I wanted to add, because like for the smaller agencies, since they have a limited amount of full-time staff, sometimes they have to manage cash flow much more carefully, and they won't have as big as a network as the large corporations. So that's why the medium to large size companies since they have that network, they don't have to be as like tight on cash flow.
Yeah, that's also a valid point for sure.
So I think that kind of sets the context, but let's dive right in. How to find the right agency.
Right. Well, Tyson, first of all, I guess you can talk to guys like us. That's probably a good starting point.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously not just us, but in general, those recommendations and, talking with people in the industry, understanding who they're working with. And a lot of times you can see the output, right? If you know people working on certain brands or whatnot, and you like the output, what you're seeing, you can get in touch with them and through networks and whatever. And so I think, definitely this personal recommendation is a great starting. But something I just add on there, and I want to talk in a bit more detail, but I do believe it's good to shop around. And it's not just about finding the one kind of agency or freelancer or whatever it might be and kind of just getting locked in at an early stage. It's good to be, sort of start off with a range of companies or people you want to work with, and then sort of go through a bit of an evaluation process, which again, I'd like to talk in a bit more detail, and then kind of narrow down. That's been my experience.
I think, and sometimes, especially if you're new to this, it's good to have like a base to compare things. And so that's why having a 3 is, I think, is always a good sign.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was going to say, like, don't some corporations, don't they actually have rules in place where they have to have like a certain amount of vendors as a part of their due diligence?
That I've never heard. But
I've heard of
makes sense, yeah.
Like talk to some market agent where sometimes they get pretty irritated because they know they've been called in because the company says like they have to evaluate 3 vendors.
Sorry, I get your point. Yeah. It's a lot of times it's already decided, right? But they just have to do it for due diligence. I think that happens a lot in the government sector. They have to send out an RFQ like in an official way and all this sort of stuff. But in reality, they've already
exactly.
decided
It's the same too. I've heard from some agencies. So they get irritated because they waste all this time. But that's kind of a different tangent. That was my one point.
But hey, Tyson, while we're kind of on this topic of finding the right agencies at a broad level, I did kind of want to pick your brains actually on the whole freelancer space, because I think you probably have quite a bit more experience there than me, and as we were talking in the previous web episode, there's all these websites now. There's Fiverr, there's Upwork, there's Uplas, this Indian one that I'm getting into recently, and then there's the Japanese ones and whatnot. And everyone's kind of got their little profile, and there's all the stars there and their recommendations. And personally, I find it a bit sort of overwhelming, and I'm like, okay, I don't really know if I can trust these guys or whatnot. I just really love to hear, how personally you're working through that, and any tips you had there.
Yeah, so I think in my experience with freelancers, I haven't used the Japanese websites like Lancers or Coconara, which I've taken a look at. I find the picture quality, maybe it was a while back, but I thought their picture qualities were really poor. And so like versus Fiverr, where like, you can see some really high quality image of things they've made. So that's one thing. Maybe my information is out of date, but I remember the quality of the samples like shown online was pretty low. So it's kind of hard to detect. But in terms of my experience, I agree with what you mentioned earlier. It's if you know what you want, using a freelancer could be a very good cost-effective way to get what you want done. But if you don't know what you want done and kind of need your handheld or people to ask you questions, I think a freelancer would not be a good person. You'll probably drive them crazy.
Right. Or vice versa, yeah.
And so that's why they have number of revisions listed.
Good
And it's
point.
usually for business owners who don't know how to communicate effectively what they want.
Yeah, great point.
So that's my thoughts there. And pretty much, if I had to give one tip, let's say I was looking for a logo. I mentioned these are 5 logos these are 5 or 6 styles that I like. These are the 3 adjectives to describe my company. These are the colors I don't want. And I'll say 4 of the 6 samples they gave me, I liked it.
Yeah.
Freelancers can be kind of a hit or a miss, but oftentimes I think it's more of the person making the request and them not checking the samples provided well enough.
Right.
Like, can this person create in the style that you like?
Yeah.
In terms of marketing, I haven't been disappointed yet.
You know, as I mentioned, I don't have a great deal of experience with these freelancers. I'm really just jumping into that space. My experience is more around the sort of small, mid, large agencies. But maybe I can just sort of walk through how we'd evaluate them. And then I think it can still tie back to this freelancer space. And it's also something personally I'm working on. So, yeah, you know, as I mentioned before, it's great to have a selection, you know what I mean? Even if that's in a freelancer space, to sort of have like 3 guys or girls or whatever it may be, or companies, once we start talking about agencies that you want to work with. When you start talking about this idea of like a pitch, you know what I mean? Especially, again, if you're talking bigger agency space, it's kind of a dirty word in the agency world, because in some cases you're asking them to work for free, right? If it's 3 companies, there's a 60% chance that they're gonna drop out, right? But I think there's ways around that. One of them is being upfront about it and saying, look, this is a pitch, there's 3 companies, and giving them the option to join or not. The second one is actually like paying them for the pitch. That's clearly a very fair way to do it.
Yeah, I'm actually curious.
Yeah.
Could you maybe give like a reference, maybe? For me, it's for those who might be their first time paying for a pitch.
That's a tricky one, Tyson, because it really depends. It depends if you're talking like medium. It depends on your total budget, I guess. Like how, like, are they pitching for an annual, you know what I mean? Or is it just a campaign or something like that? So it really depends.
Gotcha. So if it's a campaign, you're probably more likely to pay them. But if it's annual, I guess it's easier to not pay them because it's
exactly.
So gotcha. So if it's more for a campaign or like a one-off.
Yeah.
So I guess if they were to pay for it too, they're more likely to get higher quality agencies pitch too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's definitely a fair way to do it. I wouldn't say it's the norm. I think the norm is that they do it for free. Paying them is a thing, and you know, I think if you do want to maintain your relationship with those companies, then I think it is totally a fair way to go about it. And the other one I've got there is the offering a more longer term incentive, such as a retainer or something like that. That's also a way to kind of avoid the negative of a pitch situation. So, you know, like they may need to do it for free, but okay, if you get this, then, you know, what's on the table is, as we were saying before, it's this like yearly contract, or like it's a big deal, you know what I mean? So I think being clear up front about that also lessens the negatives associated with it.
I've seen I know some really good agencies, and sometimes I think the client's demands for like details of the pitch were so demanding that it just wasn't worth their time.
Yeah,
and energy to do it.
Exactly. Like I've been through it quite a few times, and I know a lot of agency, it sucks basically for the agency guys, right? Because they put a lot of effort into it.
I was going to say something on behalf of the agencies. If you're a corporation and agencies are dropping out when you ask for a proposal, you might actually be a douchebag. You can't say that, but I'm totally comfortable saying you might be a douchebag.
Yeah. It shouldn't be the norm. Let's just put it that way, because it is asking people to work for free, basically, and that's not really cool. You know what I mean? It's, especially if you're in a big corporate and you actually have money, like you have a budget. So yeah, assuming we've got our 3 companies, then the next step is developing this brief. And throughout my marketing career, like the brief is always like the thing, you know what I mean? Like it's one document, or it can be a PowerPoint presentation or whatever. But personally, I like to use just a simple Word document actually, but it just has everything in there. And clearly, the most important pieces of that puzzle is your objective. I mean, like, what are you actually trying to get out of this? A lot of times that's starting from a business objectives, and you have like marketing objectives, you have communication objectives, you have media objectives. So it all kind of filters down from this one thing. But I think to get everyone on the same page there is really important. And then obviously after that, you have your market background, and you explain the details of the product, what's your unique selling proposition, and all of these things require research to get to the depth of it, which we kind of touched on in the previous section. But once you have that document there, then everyone's on the same page. Definitely want a budget in there. Even if you don't have a hard budget, at least give them a range. You know what I mean? Because there's no point in getting them to go away and build you a Ferrari or whatever if you can only afford like a Ford or something. So I think it's always good to be upfront about your budget.
One of the common challenges I see with my consulting clients is not having any staff internally who can drive marketing strategy and execution to the next level. This really limits the growth trajectory of a company, especially for a leader like you that wants to go from 30 million to 500 million yen a year and does not have the time to spend years learning through trial and error. To solve this problem, I'm launching a marketing agency that can help companies like yours to increase leads and closing rates through SEO, Google Maps, content marketing, and websites that convert. Head over to scalingyourcompany.com and book a free consultation. Let's talk about what your business needs are, where your current strategy is letting you down, and how we can help you see real results with the methods I've successfully implemented at multiple companies myself. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, and it just saves them a lot of time. If the budget's not a match,
exactly,
you'll save your time as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you can give a range, and then the fact that you'd be talking to 3 different companies or people or agencies or whatever it might be, you are going to see your value for money. You know what I mean? So there's no reason not to throw a budget out there. And then obviously timeline, those key areas. And the way I do a pitch, again, this is always case by case, and it depends on the budget and all that sort of stuff. But, personally, I do like to give them 2 chances. So I'd get them to come back and they'd pitch once and then feedback and then pitch again. Because I think a lot of the times the agencies and people you want to work with, they're the ones who understand you and what you want. But maybe that's not at the first time, you know what I mean? Because maybe you haven't communicated well enough. Maybe your brief is not good enough. You know what I mean? But if they come back and you're like, yeah, nah, kind of thing, like I kind of like this, but it's a little bit off, or no, I'm sorry, like that's actually not what I was expecting, then okay, fine, you have that conversation, and then it's the next one. And I've seen companies before where they just get it, you know what I mean? And the next time they come back and you're like, wow, okay, you really understood what I said. And they're the kind of guys you want to be working with, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, ideally you shouldn't be doing it all the time, but that sounds like a good filter just to see. That'll be a nice sign of how it is to work with them moving forward.
Exactly. And I mean, especially if you're talking with creative agencies, like, they'll come back with these beautiful decks and it's all visual and rah, but and they've obviously spent a lot of time for that. And yeah, I get it. It's part of they need to show their creativity and all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, a lot of times, like, you just need some good ideas, right? So sometimes I just say to these guys, I'm like, look, I don't need this complicated deck. Like, just come back to me with 1 page and just have a list of ideas and let's talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you don't have the budget, expect to have a grander presentation than what you're prepared for.
Exactly. So yeah, I've been through that a few times.
I think in terms of fairness, like at what level of contract do you think it'll be fair to actually ask for 2 rounds?
Yeah. Wow, you've got the tricky questions, Tyson. Jeez.
All right.
It is case by case. And as I was saying before, like I have been lucky in my career that I've generally had sizable budgets. Like I pretty much always have over 50 million. And normally we'd be working with agencies for basically like a whole year. Like it'd be a whole year. And that budget could be up to like, $3 million, like, big
Gotcha.
budget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I think for that range, that's definitely in the, let's say, two layer, let's say 2 rounds. I
Right,
guess, yeah,
exactly.
I don't know the answer. Usually, like I like to focus on like $3,000 to $5,000, but it's something. There's not a lot of variability. Like it's pretty much something I know how to do. We can do it quickly. It's not automated, but it's a very we just do things that are very processized.
Yeah.
But if I was to say if it's something novel to pitch twice, it's I think if it wasn't like, for me it's probably more than probably 20,000.
Yeah.
Like a $20,000 contract, maybe 10 if it's not too complicated, but that's more that's me personally, and doesn't or there's always people who would be more willing to pitch twice.
Yeah.
But for me, that's kind of
Right.
if I had to make one up.
Thanks for filling that gap. But I think too, Tyson, it does come back a bit maybe to our definition of pitch. Like it could just be one set of feedback. They pitch to you, or they present their ideas about what they want to do and how they want to help you, and then you could maybe feedback and like, I'd like to have to know a bit more about this, or I'd like to know how you would do that. So maybe pitch is the wrong word in this sense. It's more like feedback, like one feedback loop, let's say. And then, they don't have to go away and be like, oh my God, we got to create another PowerPoint deck or something. It's just like, oh, we just need to think about that. And just come back with an email or something answering it. And based on that, as I was saying before, you should just get a really good feel of if you guys are communicating well. I don't want to say if they understand you, because a lot of times the person directing or asking for the help is not the best communicator. So there's that going on too. But at least you get a feel if you have that mutual understanding in a sense. Maybe that's a better way to think about it.
Yeah.
Big pitch kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's I think speaking to both sides would say, just doing like rather than the whole thing, just a section of it.
Yeah. Just to check their thinking process and that kind of connection, as I mentioned.
Yeah, that sounds like a win-win. And I guess and how would you so I guess now that kind of have like a flow for the process, how would you evaluate I guess a creative agency, and maybe how do you evaluate like a freelancer?
Yeah. So evaluation, I guess the main thing here is to try to force yourself away from gut reaction, let's say, to be a bit more non-biased. And connected about, it's always good to involve other people too, if possible, or get second opinions, which can be, obviously ideally is people working on the project, but even people outside of their project, or, people around you, friends or connections or whatnot. So the other thing you can do is just list up the criteria more specifically. So to give an example of like a creative agency, you could have a rating of 1 to 5, and you could rate them on, quality of creative ideas, confidence in their ability to execute it, confidence in the project management skills, confidence in co-working ability with the team. So how well you guys kind of gel, and then the value for money. That's an example of how you could could evaluate an agency. And then in terms of a freelancer, you could probably do pretty much something similar, I think. Maybe, so quality of communication. Do you think they can execute it? How's their project management skills? Do you enjoy and think you can work with them? And how's that value for money? And, just you can kind of play with that a bit, but just sort of forcing yourself to actually go through that process can just help you to sort of step away a bit and try to be a bit less biased in terms of how you're evaluating them.
Yeah, I think that's a good framework. And I think it gives you enough areas, and it's obviously it's not going to be like a perfect score, but at least it gives you something to base on to evaluate them.
Yeah, exactly. And it just sort of forces you to think specifically about each element, and you might surprise yourself. You might be like, oh yeah, actually now you mention it, I'm not sure if they could actually execute that, or oh yeah, it's actually pretty expensive compared to this other guy, but if I look at the creative ideas, like he was pretty much the same or something like that. So
yeah, and I like how it can also guide the questions you ask.
Yeah, true.
And if you're not, and then it goes back like, yeah, if you're not certain, maybe you could give a small test to just confirm.
Yeah.
One round of feedback to confirm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else for the evaluation part?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, probably just like I just listed up a few examples of those criteria, but obviously depending on your project, you can play around with those and see what fits.
Yeah, no, I think this probably it covers 80% of what you need to know.
Yeah.
And very simple.
Right.
So I like it. So I guess next we can move on to maybe contracts and maybe the scope of engagement.
So my experience, I think there's essentially two main scopes for engagement. There's the one-off projects, and then there's the retainer. So the one-off projects, you have clear deliverables, you have your dates, and you have these standard terms and conditions. So relatively clear, I'd say. In the retainer scenario, I think it's good to have some KPIs in there, even though you may not have like clear deliverables, at least have something there. And personally, I like to keep them soft, but it's just good to have and to discuss those, because if you don't have them, then there can be a misalignment in expectations, and that's obviously not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, definitely before the deal is signed.
Yeah, exactly. So just to have those conversations and get that out there. So then obviously connected to that is the scope of work. It's good here to outline, I think, what's in scope and what's out of scope. And also, like, if you're talking about hours, what's like a minimum number of hours that you would be dedicating to this project? Again, just so you have the shared expectations there. And then clearly the time period of the retainer, is it like a 3 month, 6 month, or 12 month or whatnot? What's the renewal period look like? And then, your standard terms and conditions there as well.
Could you maybe go a little bit deeper into the payment expectations?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do that.
You can just say some from your experience, and I can share some from my experience.
Yeah. So there's the whole sort of commission side of things too, right? You can go 100% one-off project, as we talk. Like, here's the deliverable. That's easy, right? You can go 100% retainer, or you can go this kind of hybrid thing where it's like, okay, I'm gonna do a kind of revenue share thing, or if there's a sales element involved in it, I'm gonna take a commission from that. They're probably the main ones that I'm working on, and it can be combined. I mean, like, you can be on a retainer, but then if something comes up that's out of scope, then you can charge as a separate project. That's totally on the table as well, I think. So they're kind of been the sort of the contracts I've been dealing with. How about yourself, Tyson?
Yes, as some thoughts. I was gonna say, how would you work out like like upfront payments, in between
Right.
payments, maybe payments at the end?
That's also a great point. And being like a small business, cash flow is definitely a thing. So I'm sort of pivoting a bit with my business now, and I'm trying to get more into 50-50. So 50% upfront, 50% on project deliverable, which does add a bit more administration, but I think moving into the future to avoid any cash flow issues, that's kind of what I am planning to do.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good. I think especially because you do bigger projects as well.
Yeah.
In our case, our projects range from maybe 100,000 yen to maybe 600,000 yen, but we usually do we ask for half of it in the middle
Mm.
and half at the end.
Yeah.
But if I
Oh,
was doing
really?
a bigger contract, like 100,000, or if I was doing maybe like 1,000,000 yen, I would definitely collect upfront.
Yeah.
In our case, in our case, we don't have to be as cautious with cash flow.
Mm.
But I think in our case, we decided to go midway because I think it kind of like if the client is a bit slow, we find that sometimes galvanizes them to move faster.
Right.
Meaning like they paid the money, but they haven't gotten the full result yet, and maybe they're kind of dragging on, so they kind of need to move faster. And the other thing, I'm not sure if other agencies could do this, but usually with some clients, I'm just saying like these are the dates you have to pay us, and we can definitely deliver on our end.
Mm.
But if you don't hit these milestones, we might charge you a late fee,
Right.
project delay fee. But if
Yeah.
it was a bigger project, I'll probably be more lenient. But
Mm.
because we're doing a high value for a good price, it's any costs I get, like I have to put it back on the client that they cost.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like Robert. I like how your response to it because there's no like 10 commandments. There's no golden rule.
Right.
It really depends on what you're offering, who you're
Yeah.
selling to, and also how much leverage you have.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, being a small company too, you do need to sort of look out for yourself, you know what I mean? So I think the idea of this late fee is totally a legitimate thing to be asking for, because I mean there's no doubt like the bigger companies, right? Like they have some extremely difficult payment terms, or they won't pay out for 2 months, or these kind of things. So there's no reason why the smaller guys shouldn't also be sticking up for themselves in that sense, and adding those conditions.
For the marketing agencies and the client side listening, I think paying 50% upfront is very fair, just because in some cases, there are cash flow challenges. They have to pay their vendors on time. And if, let's say, I've seen some cases where people had to take out loans because the client didn't pay on time. So I think the advantage I have is I think I'm a little bit well known. So I think people are less likely to screw me over. I've seen really good people harmed by clients not paying on time.
Yeah, it's not cool, that's for sure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Scaling Japan. In addition to serving as your fine host, I also provide advisory and coaching services to business owners who want to 2x, 5x, and even 10x their business. So stop holding your company and your team and your employees back, and let me help you and your company scale. Find more information at scalingyourcompany.com. Now back to the episode. And with that being said, though, let's finish off on how to work smoothly with agencies.
So I think, as I was mentioning before, Tyson, obviously a budget helps, right? Like having money or having access to money definitely gets the attention. But that's obviously not the case for everyone. So I'd say in terms of the briefing stage, I've sort of split my thinking into briefing stage and project stage. So when you're briefing, back to what we were talking about before, but it is important to have that clear brief and know what you want them to do, or at least know what you need help with, if that makes sense. If you are asking them to do a more long-term thing, to lay out those KPIs and sort of all be on the same page in terms of, okay, this is what we're trying to do, this is where we want to go with this. And then that sort of sets everyone in motion, aligns the team. And so that's really on the client to be able to give that more specific brief. And then as I sort of touched on before, I'd say the second point there is having a clear budget in mind, even if it's a range, because no one wants to waste their time developing some kind of pitch or strategy or whatever if there's just not the budget to do it. But if they knew that up front, they can focus their efforts on, okay, what's the most efficient way to get what they want with this money? And so I think it's that's a very important point as well. The third one I'd say, Tyson, is, to give clear feedback on the pitch, especially as we talked before, like if you're talking with 3 different people and, you're open about that and everyone knows what's going on with this pitch, just be clear. When I was in Reckitt, I had this hardcore marketing boss, and he was great. He was from P&G actually. So, these guys are very structured in their approach, but he trained us that when we had these pitches from agencies, we'd have 2 sections. We'd have the question time, and so you could ask a question. If you didn't understand something in the brief, you could ask questions to clarify what they're thinking. And so he'd go around the room and, okay, it's your question, and it's your question, your question. And the youngest, the junior would always go first, right? And then so you'd go through that. And then you'd have the feedback time. So then you had to give like very specific feedback. Okay, I would like you to do 1, 2, 3, right? So it was extremely stressful to go through that. But now I get it. Like, I don't necessarily think that's the best way to do it, because obviously it should be more fluid and it's a conversation, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of a training, it was actually very, very, it was great learning for me to go through that experience, because especially for the feedback bit, right? Because it should be quite direct, and everyone's clear at the end of the meeting, like, okay, this is what needs to change. Okay, good, go back and please do it, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I think it's for the agency side too. Like, if they put a lot of effort into something and you reject them, it's I actually think it's common courtesy to give them feedback on maybe why they didn't get it, or and that'll help them improve for the future. And also, like, there's cases where you didn't get feedback, and I've heard other agents tell me, like, I'm never working this corporation again.
Yeah,
like, they suck. They wasted our time. They didn't provide clear details. They didn't even tell us what was wrong.
Yeah.
They just said no, and like they really feel mistreated.
Yeah.
And that I think they felt like they weren't treated with respect.
Yeah.
And
it's just
and they talk to other agencies as well.
Yeah.
Like this company, and the key thing too. So this is for more of the senior level people. If you're listening, it's even if it's your manager who does it, they don't think about it as this manager was a douchebag. They actually think, wow, this company is a douchebag.
Yeah.
And so
exactly. And I mean, I get it. Like, I've been on both sides of that table, so I know, like, internally things happen, and there's politics and all this kind of stuff. But I think it's just common decency to be upfront with the guys who did the work, and just give them that full background, and just be honest with them. That's always been the way I approach it. And then to your point, Tyson, hopefully then no bridges are burned, and in the future maybe you are going to work with them again, or they'll change company, or your companies will work together. So no, you definitely don't want to be in a situation where you're creating a bad impression for yourself and for your company, and just making the whole experience unenjoyable for everyone.
No, I think that was very very well said.
So the other point I just had there, Tyson, that I thought I'd raise on this is during the project. So like, you definitely keeping that open communication, and if it is a bigger pitch or project that you're working on, I do like the idea of being really open with the communication about how it's going internally, especially if you're working with a creative team and or a media team, like, tell them how the sales are, like, share your sales data, what's working, what's not, even though it doesn't directly impact their work. Let's say it just involves them in the brand and in the company. And even if you're a smaller player or whatnot, there's no reason why you can't share things outside of that specific project about yourself and your business and what you're working on. And who knows, that might even lead to something else, like that they might be able to help you with a different problem that you have, or they might know someone who can, or they might even just give you some ideas. You know what I mean? So personally,
that's some good feedback.
Yeah.
Marketing agencies talk to a lot of marketing agencies. I mean, there's an event that you've spoken at, Tokyo Digital Marketers, where a lot of smaller agencies go to, and we gossip about brands who are awesome to work with.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, just being open and sharing that. I mean, obviously, there's an extent to what you can share in terms of NDAs and all that sort of stuff. So you can't be sort of out there just gossiping to everyone about all that's going on. But within that business context, definitely, I'm a big fan of engaging in those partner relationships and really trying to work towards a common goal. Yeah.
If I had to put it simply, the more useful data or reference points that you provide a marketing agency, the better they can help you.
Yeah. Love it. It's so true.
And sometimes, like in the freelancer case, like when sometimes my friends have issues with freelancer, I just say, like, yeah, it sucks to work with you. I would not want to work with the instruction you gave this freelancer. I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you get what you ask for in some ways, or you get what you based on how much you provide and guidance you provide.
Yeah, I totally agree, and there's nothing wrong with oversharing. Like, even if you don't think something is necessarily super relevant, like, that's okay. I mean, obviously, back to that brief thing, the brief is extremely important, and you want to be pretty spot on with that. But you can add a lot of flavor in there and a lot of background, and obviously talk through it. And I think that just, they might have thought of things that you just didn't even think about. You know what I mean? There's no reason why that couldn't be the case. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this idea of teamwork, and I don't like the hierarchy. Like some brand managers and whatnot, they do act quite superior to their agencies and stuff, and they sort of just, that's the guy that just does whatever I say, you know what I mean? But for me, it's such a waste, because they have a brain too. Like, they're smart people. There's no reason why they can't help you with many parts of your business. Like, we're in this together. So I always like to fully involve them in that way, and make them feel like that, like make them feel like that they're part of the team. And I've found that sort of really, really works.
Especially for Japan as well.
Yeah.
Thanks. It was great to have you on the podcast again, Robert.
Thank you, Tyson.
And thanks for preparing so much. And I think we had a good balance where because I actually don't know that much about the medium to large marketing agencies. And so I think we were able to balance each other off pretty well. And I'm really happy for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tyson. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge as well, and it was a great discussion for me too.
Cool. And if any corporates, big brands are looking for help with their marketing strategy, consumer research, marketing plan execution, and business development, Robert has over 15 years of experience, worked with global giants like Nielsen, Mentos, Coca-Cola, serving clients like Coca-Cola, P&G, Adidas, and has even managed marketing budgets up to $3 million. So Robert is the man, and we'll put his contact details in the show notes.
Great. Thanks for the wrap up, Tyson. Appreciate it.